Hello and welcome back to Retrovision, and we're into part 5 of Vulcans, Victors and Cuba, and it's all hotting up. It's the build up to the Cuban Missile Crisis. Hope you find it interesting, and thanks for watching.
It was clear the V-Force would have to modify its tactics if it was going to continue to be able to penetrate these defenses. An air-launched missile that could be fired at the target from a safer range looked like an answer. In the late 50s, work started on a standoff bomb project codenamed Blue Steel. This weapon, to be carried by Vulcans and Victors, could be launched 100 miles away from the target. At 35 feet long, it was as large as a fighter and would require considerable modification to both aircraft. When launched, its advanced onboard computer that was impervious to enemy jamming would fly the missile on a predetermined flight path to the aiming point. Within a specified range, a second rocket engine would fire, increasing the projectile speed to Mach 3. Once over the target, the engine would cut, and Blue Steel, with its 1 megaton warhead, would descend and detonate. To carry this sizable new weapon, the Mark II versions of both the Vulcan and Victor had been developed. The concept of the Vulcan B-2 dated back to 1955, when Avro's project department came to the conclusion that the existing Mark I airframe was capable of considerable further development. The principal task was to modify the wing that would allow the installation of much more powerful engines, considerably improving the aircraft's bomb load and high-altitude performance. The first B-2 was delivered to RAF Waddington in July 1960, sporting Olympus 201 engines, each producing 18,000 pounds of thrust. Meanwhile, work proceeded at Handley Page on the B-2 Victor. The major design change was the installation of the new Rolls-Royce Conway power plant, almost doubling the total thrust and completely transforming the Victor's performance. The B-2 versions of both aircraft were operational just as the early prototypes of the Blue Steel missile were ready for testing. Remarkably, the arming of the V-Force with standoff weapons had been under active consideration from as early as 1946. Work on this project, codenamed Blue Boar, was carried out by Vickers Armstrong. In 1949, drawings were produced of a bomb with a television camera installed for remote-controlled targeting. The air staff were concerned about the reliability of TV guidance, and in 1954, Blue Boar was cancelled in favor of an internally guided weapon. Several other plans were considered before the ministry settled on Blue Steel, the most extraordinary being a 20-foot span flying bomb made of plastic and powered by a turbojet mounted under its fuselage. Airborne trials of Blue Steel started in 1958 and continued for the next 4 years, testing every aspect of the weapon system. During these experiments, it was found that the missile's range could be doubled to 200 miles by adjusting the missile's trajectory. With these settings, a Blue Steel could have hit Leningrad while the attacking V-bomber was still over the Baltic. The first squadron to arm with the new weapon was 617 of Dambusters fame. These Vulcan B-2s were equipped in the late summer of 1962 and nearing operational readiness as the Cuban crisis loomed. During this period, the Americans, with their massive force of B-52s, were developing a standoff system of their own.
On January 5th, a major milestone was marked with the rollout of the first production B-52H. This model bomber is being factory produced as a Skybolt carrier.
The US solution was the more ambitious air-launched system, Skybolt. This weapon was intended to have a range of 1,150 miles. That would allow a bomber to fire the missile without even entering enemy airspace. With the British H-bomb tests and Macmillan's tenacious diplomacy, the Americans were persuaded to resume the special relationship between the two nations, and several Vulcans were adapted to take the new US weapon. With Skybolt being significantly smaller than Blue Steel, Vulcans would be able to carry one missile under each wing. While scientists at Aldermaston worked on a British warhead to fit the Skybolt's compact nose cone, Avro submitted a proposal for a Phase 6 Vulcan, capable of carrying 6 Skybolts. The new and considerably bigger aircraft would have had a far greater range than that of the B-2, and be able to maintain a state of continuous airborne alert along the lines of the system employed by the Americans. Included with the proposal was an impressive defense strategy that envisaged supplementing the existing V-Force with 48 Phase 6 Vulcans. By using a system of staggered takeoffs, the RAF would have had enough airborne aircraft to launch at least 84 Skybolts at any time of the day or night.
This is Skybolt missile number 20013 in preparation for the first instrumented drop test at Eglin Air Force Base. Preliminary steps toward flight testing were accomplished during the first 6 months of 1961, and the first Skybolt airworthiness test was successfully conducted. A B-52G carried 4 test missiles identical to operational missiles. Following these initial shakedown tests, the drop tests began in late February. The primary purpose of the tests was to demonstrate safe separation of the missile from the pylon at 40,000 feet at Mach 0.8. Missile separation was satisfactory. Minimum roll was observed and good missile stability was maintained. All objectives in both tests were satisfactorily met. In mid-March, the first stage flight weight motor was successfully fired, only 12 months after the propulsion system design had been established. A second stage motor was fired in the continuing verification of flight weight motor development. The test was interrupted when one of the thrust reverser plugs was prematurely ejected. Redesign of the reverser plug retaining ring and associated hardware will prevent this kind of failure in the future.